Welcome to Season 4 of Grief in Common. You're listening to different voices from the Winston Swish youth team.
We're a group of grieving young people who are helping to shape the future of grief support.
We're all different, but we've all got grief in common. If you are aged 13 or over, this podcast is suitable for you.
Winston Swish is a charity that supports children and young people who are bereaved or facing the death of someone important to them. And this podcast is our space to talk honestly about what that feels like.
We'll be sharing our ideas, experiences and conversations that we hope will help you feel less alone. If you'd like to help us keep this going, you can donate at winstonswish.org. Thank you.
In this episode of Grief in Common, we talk about grief and death throughout, as well as chronic illness, kidney failure and suicide.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Grief in Common podcast. My name is Toby. You might have seen me in a few episodes before in previous seasons. I'm joined here with Iman, and today we're going to be talking about being bereaved young carers or carers for people with serious illnesses. I'm 20. My dad passed away due to a suicide when I was 14 years old. Iman, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Iman. I've also been on the show a few seasons ago. I lost my dad when I was 20, so almost 4 years ago. And I was a young carer for my dad since I was born, due to some serious chronic illnesses as well.
My dad was chronically ill. He had chronic pain for quite a few, I think for about 11 years by the time he took his life. And I can't remember the exact age that I kind of started like helping out with caring for him, but I was just 14 when he died, so it was quite young. He couldn't like really do a lot of things like putting his shoes on. He couldn't stand up a lot, like for a long amount of time. He couldn't really walk for a long amount of time. So I did a lot of helping with his shoes and socks, helping with his mobility cart that he had, calling it mobility cart because he was like in his 40s when he got it and he hated calling it a scooter. He was like, I'm not an old man, we're not calling it that. But yeah, so one of my jobs was making sure the batteries for that were charged and then switching them in and out. And I helped him sort his medication. He had quite a lot that he had to take, both in the morning and the evening. When I got home from school, it was like my job to wake him up from his naps and like help sort his sleep apnea machine and things like that. And yeah, that carried on until he passed away, and probably would have continued doing it if he was still here. Yeah, so that's my experience. Would you like to share yours?
Yeah, sure. I guess mine was kind of similar, but in the way where I saw my dad going from being quite active to being completely deteriorating over a length of time. And I have a few different moments that stand out of like the caring journey. And I don't want to say milestones, but just, yeah, moments that I remember from the health journey, let's say. So my dad was diagnosed with kidney failure through Fanconi syndrome, which is like a genetic condition which leads to the leaking of a protein from the kidney, which eventually means you'll get kidney failure. He was diagnosed with this just soon after I was born. And then from between then to around, let's say 2008, 2009, I can still remember him coming through the front door at 6 o'clock after his job, like in my old house. But after then, he didn't really work. But we were grateful because he worked with American Express, and at the time, very fortunate that he was able to still be employed, but not work because of his health. So his life kind of mainly became like at home. So I guess I was lucky enough to have like a stay-at-home father, as I like to think of it, because we were always surrounded by him. And my mum was the primary carer for my dad, and I was the young carer. But at the same time, my grandmother lived with us and my grandmother's sister, so my dad's mum and auntie, and they were also elderly and had health conditions as well. So my mum had a lot of caring to do in the house. So that's 3 people. And I guess I just became a carer as well for my dad. And there's like another specific moment where I can remember where like specifically things started to increase in responsibility is when his kidney was failing. So then he was preparing for a transplant. So before you go on to a transplant, he went through dialysis. I remember like we had like kind of like a training for the dialysis because they had to put a bathroom and ensuite because he was having like the water dialysis at home. I have 2 sisters, so it was 3 girls in total, and there was 3 different bags of fluid that he had to like he would go through a night, and one was big, one was middle, one was small. So then my older sister would take the big one, I would take the middle one, and then my younger sister would take the small one, and we'd all go trudging up the stairs. There was like a big glass table, I remember it so clearly, and I would sanitize it and then lay out the bags onto the machine, and then you have to connect all the wires, like the tubes, and then put one end into the bathroom, like in the shower, and then the last part would be for my dad to like just clip himself in. After I'd done that, then I would always sort out his medicines. He had those little like, just the I don't know, not blister packs, but yeah, like something like that, like little trays, Saturday, Monday, everything.
Yeah.
And like I remember till now the names of the medications like glued into my mind. But he would also, take medications like 3-4 times a day. And then because he was diabetic as well, managing his sugar was quite a big thing. So he often would kind of get like a sugar low. So often like he'd be like, can you go get me like, I don't know, like a Lucozade or like a water or a chocolate. And he always had like a mini fridge. So it would just be like keeping an eye on that and making sure that he's got whatever he needs in case that does happen. Then he had his kidney transplant. There's a lot to it, but yeah, so he was, I guess at this time, a bit more mobile because he was just having the dialysis overnight. But this is from, I'd probably be like around, I don't know, like 9 years old. But fast forward to like 10 years later when my dad's kidney failed again, my dad had a different type of dialysis where he was in the hospital. And that completely changed everything because he became really immobile. So before, when I saw my dad always driving or he couldn't walk that much, he would walk with a stick, but he completely stopped driving and he would spend a lot of time in the hospital because you have to, for this type of dialysis, you have to be in the hospital. And I think it was quite visible how drained he was. And obviously by that time, like he's 10 years older, but he also used to say that like, I'm still young. He was at this time, he was in his 50s. Because he passed away when he was 51. And it was funny because the doctors, when they gave us his note, said that from outside, you look like a normal 50-year-old, but from the inside, your body is like an 80-year-old, which is crazy. But I guess with my journey of caring, it went from being able to do a lot to kind of not being able to do enough because he was now getting taken care of in hospital rather than at home. And of course he did have many of hospital stays, like that was a given. He was always in hospital. I felt like it the loss of identity that came from being younger and being able to do quite a lot and feeling useful, but to then 10 years later, or I'm more of an adult now, so I'd like to do more but I can't because his condition has worsened so much that there's not much I can do to help. It's now like in the hands of the doctors and the hospitals. So I think for me that was quite a big struggle as well, and I struggled to manage that as I was in school, college and university. It makes you feel a little bit isolated from your peers and like from your teachers and your friends because you're always occupied with something. But as he got less dependent on me and more dependent on like the healthcare services, I found that like my anxiety was rising so much because I'd be at school and I'd be worrying about, oh, I hope he's okay. Like, oh, what's going to happen? Or, I'm worried about his health or I have an exam. And I couldn't really like talk about it much. And I tried to share like this anxiety with my form tutor. And he just said, oh, you just need to be more positive. And I was like, I don't think so. But no. I don't know. I just felt quite isolated because I always just felt so like I had something on my mind and I could never focus. I was aware of the fact that he wasn't going to live that long for a while, and I was always expecting it. So I was living with some sort of anxiety, and I think people just expected me to be like, well, you know he's ill and you know what the outcome is going to be, so just be okay with it. But it doesn't make it easier. I just felt very lonely. So I don't know what your experience was like, and if you've got anything similar, or like how you felt at school, or were you able to manage it or get some support, because it's a lot.
Yeah, I did have very similar experience, especially during secondary school. I hated having to leave my dad in the day. I A lot of times, like up until when I was in year 9 when he passed away, I did like cry going to school most times. Hated being there because I was constantly like worried that something was gonna happen whilst I was there. And it did end up like happening whilst I was at school. That's when he passed away. And so that was it was like, oh my God, I didn't think that would actually happen, because I'd asked my mum and dad a few times when I was younger if my dad was going to die because of his illness. I didn't really understand that like chronic pain wasn't really something that could directly like be the cause of someone's death. And so, yeah, I think like the fact that I did end up coming home from school and he passed away, like I was already really terrified of that. Like, I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but like you said, with loss of identity, it's like suddenly I didn't have my dad to worry about all the time. I wasn't constantly thinking about coming home and waking him up from his naps, or do I need to charge the batteries for his mobility cart, or has he taken his meds? Do I need to help him cook dinner? And it was kind of like this void of worry and care that had nowhere to go. I don't know if you kind of felt similarly, but I think I kind of had a level of grief for like caring for him.
Yeah.
Even though we were both very young, caring for our dads, and like no child should ever really like have to go through that. It was like I kind of missed it in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you ever feel like that?
Yeah, completely. I really resonate with that. I felt like my caring, or my love for my dad, that I was expressing through caring for him, was my purpose. And that becomes difficult when all of a sudden it's put on hold, or the responsibilities change, or it's not physically possible, feasible, circumstantial to take care of that anymore. It's like your whole world like just stops, because you're so used to a certain routine. At this time I need to do this, at that time I need to go there, on this day we need to go to the hospital, we need to check up on the GP, we need to do all of these things, and all of a sudden that stops. A part of being a carer, that does become your identity. You like, and I don't think people understand that until they've been through something like that. It's not something that you can switch off from. Like, we breathe 24 hours a day. You don't get to switch off from thinking about another person. And when they do pass away, you're still thinking about them. Your body just wants to keep on helping and doing, but like it hasn't understood the weight of what's happening yet. And it does take quite a lot of time, years even, I think, time, however long it takes, to understand that afterwards. It sounds strange, but we'd been expecting his death for a long time. We would always have the death talk very openly and freely. Like, my dad was very chilled about it. We'd be open about it, and it wouldn't be anything scary. It'd just be reality. But I remember his 40th birthday in hospital, and he was like, like, I've done it. I'm 40. Because his brothers, who also had the same genetic condition, died in their 30s. So he was like, if I could make it to 50, that would be great. Yeah. And then he made it to 50. He was like, I'm solid. Like, I've really done something here. Like, it's really funny. So, like, okay, more time had passed, and we'd been expecting this death for like since I was a kid, and now I'm in my 20s and stuff, and it still hasn't happened. But I felt like a lot of the time of when I was also caring, in those 20 years of being a carer, I was also grieving before it even happened. And I think it's crazy to have to grieve someone before they're gone. Like, knowing that they're going to go one day but not knowing when doesn't make it any easier, but it's such a difficult loss that I'd never understood. And I thought, okay, because I've grieved him, this sounds so bad, because I've grieved him whilst he's ill, whilst he's sick, when he does pass away, it'll be okay because I've experienced this already. But when it does happen, it becomes even more difficult. So I felt like I was doing a lot of the grieving while he was alive but deteriorating, and that also made me feel really guilty because I felt like I was so consumed in my own grief, worry, sadness about his health and like how I felt like I couldn't move, that then I started feeling guilty that maybe I'm not doing enough to support him emotionally and being there for him. It's a very difficult thing to feel and understand, especially when you're a teenager.
Yeah, that does sound like really difficult to have dealt with. A little bit different with me because my dad's death was a very sudden one. Like, was not it was a suicide. You don't ever expect that.
Of course, yeah.
And I don't know, I think now that I'm older and I look back, I don't know if I exactly kind of started grieving him, but I can kind of look back and realize how he had deteriorated because his chronic pain just got worse and worse, and it got to the point where they couldn't do anything for him anymore. It was just take your meds, and that was that. And he really struggled with depression, and so I think that kind of wore him down quite a bit. And I don't feel it anymore, but when I was younger, it took quite a few years for me to like get out of the headspace, but I felt a bit guilty because I could look back and realize that he had been deteriorating in his mental health, and I'm like, oh, okay, there were signs there that he was going to do what he did, but I was 14, and so obviously I wasn't going to recognize that. And so I think kind of to a degree I did kind of grieve who he was a little bit, because kind of similarly with your dad, my dad did get a lot worse as I grew up, because when I was really young, I think I was like 2 when he had like an operation for something else that caused his chronic pain. And so I was really little when it first started, but at that point he was still very mobile. He was at working. He would go on like massive long hikes with my granddad and things like that. And yeah, by the time I was 14, it was like he needed help pretty much doing everything. Like, I would go shopping with him because he couldn't really get out of his mobility cart to go and grab things off the shelves. He also had to retire early. I think he retired in his 40s. He passed away when he was 51 as well, like your dad. And like you said, kind of like it is your whole life. Like, you're constantly thinking about it and you're constantly helping care for them and things like that. And in my case, I always talk about this and I used to feel very guilty about it. But for me, I kind of felt like a weight off my shoulders. Like, I felt a bit of relief when he died. Because on one hand, I was grieving the fact that, obviously grieving him, but also grieving that I didn't have anywhere to put that care and that worry anymore. But also I was happy that I wasn't constantly like terrified that something was going to go wrong. And so I kind of gained more ambition. The only thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to stay and be his carer, which obviously nothing wrong with that, but that was like at 14, that was all I wanted to do with my life. And I wanted to go to the college that was like 10 minutes away, that really isn't that great because it was only a 10-minute walk. So I wasn't that far away. I could go back in my lunch and sit with my dad. Obviously that never happened because by the time I went to college, he had died. And so I went to a better college that was an hour and a half away on the train because I no longer cried every time I left the house. I'm now going to university, which is like 4 hours away from where I live. And it's kind of peaceful, not constantly having that fear and that need to care for someone. I don't know if you've kind of felt similarly in that or can relate in any way.
Yeah, of course. Firstly, I just want to say, like, I really appreciate your vulnerability here because it's very difficult to talk about these things. And I think when you grow up from being a child into a teenager, into an adult, when you've been caring for someone else, it can often feel like that is your only purpose. And you often feel guilty for doing anything else or for not focusing on your caring responsibilities. Or let's say you decide to go out one day with your friends in the evening and you come back and you're like, oh no, I came home and he was in the ambulance or in the hospital, etc. It can feel like you're not doing your job properly. But there's no shame and there's no guilt in understanding that, of course, your quality of your life will change after your father passes away. Just because opportunities opened up to focus more on, our education, our life, on goals, does not make us selfish or ungrateful. And I think it's powerful that we're able to recognize that, although it was a really noble and a selfless part of our lives that we got to take care of our fathers for so long and give them love and make them feel special for as long as they were alive, that love doesn't decrease just because we're not doing that anymore. And we're continuing to take care of them in a way because we're taking care of ourselves. And I know as much as my dad loved that I used to help him around, he would love if I actually gave time to like my studies and my future, because he never wanted for me to stop myself. And I'm sure that's the same for your dad as well. I completely understand about what you said about, like choosing a college that's 10 minutes away compared to one that's an hour and a half away. I was in college and my dad's kidney failed again, and I was supposed to complete my A-levels just that year. I had so much anxiety. So my college said to me, just do one A-level this year and then you can do the harder ones next year. That would have been my third year. By some crazy chance, COVID ended up happening. So I didn't have to take those A-levels, but that year I had to choose which university I wanted to go to. And that meant my sister was also going to university the same year as me. So originally we had decided to go and view a university up in Manchester. And but obviously Manchester is quite far from Brighton. It's the north compared to the south. Very, very far. It was a better degree, actually. It was, for my course, it was a BSc rather than a BA, and the opportunities in the department was massive. But because our dad was now going to go through a kidney transplant and my mum was going to give him the kidney, we knew that we wanted to be closer to home, to Brighton. So we chose to go to London, which is only an hour away, because we just said, like, God forbid if something happens, if I have to like drive down, I don't drive even, but like if I get the train down and it takes long, or like, if someone else drives me down, it's, I don't know, like 5-6 hours, more than that. I'd rather be able to be 1 hour on the train away than miles away. And if something happens, if he gets called in for a surgery, I'm grateful that I did that, because my life has been great in London and I've done my degree. But I do think that after he has passed away, it's not selfish of me to admit that I've been able to focus on things that I wasn't before. And the quality of my education has improved, like after a lot of perseverance, definitely. And that's what he would have wanted. And ultimately, there's nothing wrong with admitting that. Like, it's great to not have to live in anxiety every single day. It's not a way to live. It's very difficult, especially for a person in their teens going into adulthood. Of course, I struggle with my grief now that he's gone, and I do think about him a lot. But I am really, really glad that he's also not in pain anymore. And like you mentioned, when you notice like the signs, or you think like, oh, his mental well-being was deteriorating, I also noticed that as well. And I felt a lot of guilt because I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. But I saw him getting quieter, and to see him feel so lifeless and just drained in front of me and I couldn't do anything, I would never want to experience that again. And I'm glad that I don't have to. I think it's a part of life that we've unfortunately had to experience at a very early age. It is difficult, but it's it's a learning curve, I guess. It's hard for me to talk about it without getting emotional. So I'm trying to stop myself.
I am as well.
But it's just, I don't think there's any shame in admitting that I'm glad that they passed away, because I felt like my dad's dignity would have been compromised, and he would have as well. He was in the hospital for 2 months before he passed away, and he was on a machine. And I only understood this later on after he passed away, that it was a more loving thing for us to let him go like that rather than just to have him. It's a hard thing, a very hard conversation to have about it, and it's obviously like very taboo, but ultimately we know we don't want to see our loved ones in pain. So the time that they went, it was for the best for them, so that they didn't have to endure worse, and it would have been harder on us. So it's something that you have to come to peace with, right? And it does take time, but yeah, I don't know.
Did your school really kind of know much about what was going on and like give any support? Because for me, I don't really know how much my mum said to my secondary school. She worked at the primary school that I went to, so I think there was like a lot more communication with what was happening. But then with secondary school, no idea how much she told them. But like all I kind of really got was a little like plastic card that meant I could leave class whenever I wanted. And like they had a school counselor that I saw once a week, but I really don't think she was very qualified in dealing with like grief or like children dealing with what we were. The only advice I ever really got was very wishy-washy and just like, oh, you like photography with your dad? Go and do that. You'll feel better. And I was just like, okay. Did anything better happen for you?
No, it didn't. I think similarly with primary school, I think they were aware. My mum wasn't able to pick us up from school because she was with my dad at the hospital. So my friend's mum would take us home. So I think they were aware. And then with secondary school, I remember being fresh into secondary school and I was like, wow, I'm so old. Like, look at me. I'm going to be in year 7. And I was like, wow, this is like a big milestone of my life at 11. And I felt really sad because my dad wasn't there, because he was in Cambridge, and my mum was as well, because he was having a very critical surgery, etc. And I don't know how much they knew, but at the same time, I was in year 7. My older sister was in year 11. It was literally the first week where I've started. I don't know what happened, but I remember having a nosebleed, and then they took me out and they're like, are you good? And I was like, no, my dad's in surgery. And they're like, oh. And then they took me somewhere, and then I saw my sister. She's like, why aren't you in class? And I was like, why aren't you in class? And she had like a paper on her, like with, like pens and pencils, like coloring and stuff. That's all I remember. And then after that, like literally nothing. And I remember more and more of like when I was in like year 10 and year 11. And I just felt like my experience was completely pushed to the side. And that really hurt me, because everyone is going through different things. Secondary school is tough. Being a child is tough. Being a teen is tough. Trying to like study is tough. Like, friendship issues, whatever. Every family, every child has something going on. And I felt like my peers' experiences of whatever they were going through, really important things, were being validated. But my experience as someone who's caring for someone who's actively ill and their life is not certain was completely being diminished to nothing. And I literally said to my form tutor so many times, like, I'm so worried and anxious. And I remember just sitting outside the form room and just being like upset and crying visibly. And he'd just be like, oh, not you again, like this. And I was like, and I thought it was really passive aggressive that when I left school in year 11, we got like awards, and he put just be positive. And I was just like, you don't do that, mate. Like, come on. Like, and I never had the nerve to say anything or ask for like rest. And I wish I could have been like, can I have some time out? Or can I just go, I stand outside, or, something like that. But it was never really catered for. But it just leads back to, the education system and, like what we're doing with Ask Me, and like, people just, and teachers just assuming rather than asking. So yeah, my experience wasn't that great either.
I also got given an award at the end of year 9. They would have like little like commendations, and I got one for resilience. I was just like, well, didn't really have a choice but to keep coming to school because I was a child and needed an education.
Oh my God. Yeah, see, like, I feel like it's so tone deaf and it's so passive aggressive to get an award for resilience and, oh, just be positive when you've got real worldly things going on, like existential stuff as a teenager.
I know, kind of wild looking back at it now. So we were talking about like loss of identity and kind of having all of that care left over when our dads passed away. Did you ever kind of struggle with having like still being stuck with that kind of reflex to care for someone, and it kind of goes on to like family members and friends and things like that, and like you just kind of can't stop wanting to care for someone?
Yeah, definitely. I think I experienced it quite a few times even before my dad passed away because there was 2 other members of my family who were living with us. So I was always anxious about them. So my grandmother and her sister, call her my nan. When one of them passed away, I was thinking about the next one. When the next one passed away, I was thinking about my dad. And then that wouldn't stop. And then when my dad passed away, I did start to get worried. And I think around 2 years afterwards, my mum had like a little flare up with her heart. I realized, oh, it's been so long and now I'm worried and anxious again. And you mentioned friends, which is quite funny because I became friends with someone who's now my best friend, and I found out that she had diabetes, and immediately I was just like, my heart, because I was like, my dad had diabetes, and I just wanted to like take care of her. So like, I remember we were in central London. It was on my birthday, and it was a very hot day, and we were doing loads of walking, and I was just kept on checking off, and I was like, do you want chocolate? Like, do you want water? Like, are you okay? Like, I just felt like I had to keep doing that, and I think there's something really beautiful about that because, of course, when you have cared for someone, like you're not going to just stop. Like your nature is to be giving and help others, and that's really beautiful. For me personally, because I had that experience of getting older, going to university, and I wasn't able to help my dad as much because he became more reliant on hospitals. But I did see how difficult it was for my mum because her whole life she had just been caring for 3 people and then my dad nonstop. And whilst we were at university, it was just them. And one thing that I picked up and understood about this grief of not being able to care is when you've been doing something for so long and to have it stop, and you can't do anything about it, your body, your mind will catch up to you even if you're not ready to, because the flight or fight mode is over now. Like you've been on adrenaline taking care of this person, your father, for so long, but now it's stopped. You've got nothing to do. So your body, what I felt like is the surroundings, my body understood that, okay, there's no more caring to do. Now you need to face all of this. You need to process and understand what you went through, whether you like it or not. And that can be very difficult because you might think you're not ready, but then it's just happening and you feel all of these emotions. You're trying to understand and you feel really down. And it is tough. The only thing that got me through it was talking about it and starting to have therapy, like counseling. I'm a big advocate of it for anyone who's bereaved in any situation. But on top of that, when you've got a shared experience like us, when you've been taking care of someone from when you were a child to a teenager, that's a big thing enough. And I think right now we're doing some processing as we talk about it. So just like it takes time for grief and it's not linear, it goes up and down and it takes time to process and understand, and you have to give it the time and allow yourself the tools to process it. We have to do the same with caring because you've been doing it for so long, it just becomes default. First of all, recognize that you've had a very rare experience and not many people do at this age on top of the bereavement already. So there's 2 things that you're grieving. You're grieving your person, you're grieving the caring, like your role and responsibility. So just understand that. And secondly, like once you've given yourself the grace, talk about it, and try and, if you can, advocate for yourself to get some tools, whether even if therapy is not your thing, find someone to talk about it with. For me, my mum sharing her experiences of how she used to care was cathartic for her because she doesn't like going to therapy. And for me, I would share, my experiences of, I used to do this for my dad and that for my dad. So whether you can do that with someone, a safe person, whether it's a friend or a family, that's what I would say to anyone who's been a carer and bereaved. That's what I did, but I want to know, I'm like curious to know how it was for you.
I think the main thing that comes with being a bereaved carer is realizing that it doesn't all just stop when the person that you've been caring for dies. Like, you don't instantly just get out of that headspace, because especially for us, we were doing it for pretty much all of our lives. And so that was like autopilot, caring for someone. I just remember, I can't remember how long it was after my dad passed away. Maybe I was like 15 or 16. And I was sat in the hairdressers and I was waiting for my mum to come. And I had no idea what time it was. And in my mind, she was late and I didn't know where she was. And I was panicking because I was like, oh my God, like, what if something's happened to her? What if she needs me? Like, and I don't have my phone. And she ended up literally being fine. She came like 5 minutes later. She was just a little bit late getting there. But it was like straight back to that headspace of being like, oh my God, I'm not there. Something's gone wrong. And yeah, it kind of took a bit of getting used to not like constantly having to worry. And so I think, yeah, that definitely, I just had to say to myself, like, it's fine. You don't have to think like that anymore. Everything is okay. You'll be told if something is wrong and things like that. And quite recently, June last year, I got a message from my friend, and I won't say exactly what it is, but she got a bit of a scary diagnosis. And then some of the meds didn't work, so they had to put her on like a lot stronger ones. And she lives in Scotland, so we're very far away. And I met her for the first time in September last year. We met very safely on the Way Widowed and Young group, like almost 6 years ago. But we live so far away, so that was the first time we'd ever met each other. And I just felt so powerless being so far away from her. And I was trying not to like overcrowd her or like smother her and message her and being like, are you okay? How are you doing? How can I help? Tell me what's going on. And I had to tell myself to calm down and just be like, she'll let you know if she needs anything. You can ask her how she is every now and again. Don't overdo it and things like that. Thankfully, I did get a message the other day that she is doing all good now and that she's going to be fine. But yeah, it was like I kind of went straight back into needing to check in on someone and make sure that she was okay. And I hadn't felt like that in so long, like the kind of need to help someone. And so, yeah, that I did talk to my mum about that. I was just like, I hate being so far away. I want to be closer to her. But yeah, I think being very kind of open with like having that constant need to care for people with my mum definitely helped me. Like, I told her that I was panicking, like that time in the hairdressers. Like, it took a few days for me to be like, okay, I'm not embarrassed anymore that happened. But yeah, I think just to actually telling someone that that's what I've been feeling and that I'd kind of been sitting with that definitely really helped, because keeping stuff like that bottled up is never good for anyone. It always ends up coming out very messy eventually. Pretty much same advice as you said, just you unfortunately do have to accept that it's something that's going to take a while to go away sometimes. Like, obviously everyone has different experiences, so some people get out of that mindset quicker than others. Some people might take significantly longer, but it's completely natural to still feel that way. Like, you're not going to just snap out of it the minute you don't have, like, our dads to care for. You just got to take it easy on yourself and let yourself feel all those emotions.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more with that. And I'd also just say one thing is, don't be surprised that, let's say, like, after some time you think, okay, it's not affecting me, but then something may happen that's similar to the experience that you had with your dad, and then it all creeps up again and you're like, oh my God, I thought I was past this. I thought it was okay. Because I had a very similar experience with one of my friends told me that he had kidney failure and it was a genetic condition. And immediately my heart again was like, my dad. And it was so similar. It was really affecting me. And he had his kidney transplant recently. And I didn't know how to explain to my wider group of friends that I'm really worried about him. And at the same time, I didn't want to give them any anxiety because they were like, yeah, he'll be okay. Like, oh, okay, let's go now. Let's go somewhere else. Because underneath, like, I knew the weight of it and like post-op complications and things like that. And I really wanted to help as much as I could, but I had to understand that, like, he's his own person. He has his own autonomy. He's got his friends and his family, and sometimes it is too much to let people in. You just need to focus on the healing. So for me, during that time, then I just spoke to my other friends, and like I was speaking to my mum a lot, and I said, look, I'm here whenever you need me. I'm happy to come over and drop some food off when you need me, because it's easy to be overwhelmed in wanting to help, but it's all just love, it's all just care, it's all just empathy, it's understanding. These are all good things, so it's not a bad thing. And like you said, when you go use those tools of like talking to your mum or a friend about it, you're able to go through it. Allowing some space is good, because it can be really triggering and it can be really easy to fall back in those mindsets, but don't underestimate yourself and how much you can actually get through. One last thing though, I thought it would be funny to mention. I still, till this day, get emails from the carer centre, and I don't know how to reply to them and tell them that my dad's died. Like, still getting, emails from them. But I don't know, maybe I'm okay with having those emails because it reminds me that this was a part of me and this is something that I'll always carry. And I do get to be proud of the fact that I got to do something so beautiful, I like to say it as. So maybe I'll see how long I'm on their mailing list for all these opportunities for support from the carer centre. But I just thought that was funny to share, really.
Thank you for talking to me today about your experience of being a bereaved young carer. I think it's been quite cathartic for both of us, kind of being able to fully talk about these experiences and, like we said earlier, kind of help ourselves process everything that's happened.
It was my pleasure. Honestly, I was going to say the exact same word. It has also been very cathartic and therapeutic for me. And I'd encourage others to speak about this topic as well, alongside grief, if you have been affected by it, because the only way to process it is to talk about it. And there are lots of resources available for people. So, for example, the fact that I still get emails from the carer centre, from my local authority, shows that there are some support available, even if you aren't able to get it through your school or elsewhere. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Grief in Common. For support, resources, or to donate and help us keep creating, visit winstonswish.org.